So we give thanks and honor and praise to the creator of the heavens and the earth. From the beginning of the Holy Scriptures that we read that it says in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth, and that's the God that we serve. That's the God that we acknowledge. That's the God that we come before on this day to acknowledge once again that there is none other beside him. For once again, we acknowledge that he alone is the creator of the heavens and the earth. And as we read in the beginning of the Holy Scriptures, the beginning of the Bible, as people may know it, we see that God created everything in the heavens above and upon the earth beneath in 6 days, and he ceased from all of his work on the seventh day and blessed the seventh day and made the seventh day a holy day. And that's this day that we are observing at this time. And also within the portion that we'll be reading today, we'll be reading about acknowledgement of this holy Sabbath day that Jehovah God, the creator of the heavens and the earth, has given unto us to acknowledge once again that it was he alone that created the heavens and the earth by himself. And he's the one that placed everything into existence, everything once again in the heavens above and upon the earth beneath and everything in the waters under the earth, once again was made by the God that created all things. So we acknowledge him, and once again his name appears, as we say it all the time, at least 6,500 times within the Holy Scriptures, within what they call the Old Testament. So therefore, being that his name is mentioned so much, we have to give his name honor and praise. Amen. And make sure we don't desecrate his name, which is also mentioned in this week's reading as well in terms of profaning the name of Jehovah God. And we pronounce the name Jehovah God once again as it appears various times within the Holy Scriptures. And within your reading within the text, you'll see the Lord, but in the Hebrew writing, that is where the name of God is. And they just translate it in various versions or various translations of the Holy Scriptures or various translations of versions of the Bible. They translate the name of God, Yehovah, or also pronounce as Yahweh. You'll see in the English, the Lord. So as the reader continues to read and you'll hear the name of God in which you see it is the Lord, is because that's where the name of God is. And reading it that way causes your mind to focus on who the true and the living God is, and keeps your mind away from keeps your mind away from who is not the true and the living God. So once we acknowledge him by name and continue to praise him and continue to acknowledge him and thank him, we will be able to receive all of the blessings that he has in store for us. So we pray at this time that Jehovah God's presence will be among us here. Amen. And in all the places that he is allowing the children of Israel to gather before him. We pray that he would allow words of truth to be taught here, as well as in all of the places that he is allowing the children of Israel and all the people amongst the nations to gather, that his presence would be there and that he would allow words of truth to come forth in order to cause us to make improvements in our lives. So once again, we're going to get into this portion, begin reading in this portion called Emor, as we will be reading from the book of Leviticus chapter 21. And the book of Leviticus, primarily it was given that name because when the people that read this book, they saw a lot of things that pertain to the Levites. So the name in the Greek is Leviticus, which means pertaining to the Levites. We're going to read specifically, starting in this portion, concerning things that are specific for the priests, right, and not just the Levites, because there is a difference between the priests and then the overall tribe of Levi, or the tribe of the Levites. Mm-hmm. So once again, as it was also when we read it, or as it was just read in the book of Ezekiel, you're going to read the same instructions that were given to the priests here. Because in the book of Ezekiel, that was God speaking to Ezekiel during the Babylonian captivity to remind the children of Israel that there will be a restoration of the children of Israel, and basically the same commandments, statutes, and judgments that we were bound to then are the same ones that we will be bound to in the future. So we have an opportunity as we continue to read within the Holy Scriptures to read the instructions that Jehovah God has commanded unto us to keep, and therefore it's not something that is just of the past, it's something of the present and definitely of something of the future. So these words that we read here, and all of the words that we read from the beginning of Genesis until the book of Malachi, all of those things are the word of God, and we have to make sure that we pay attention to everything that Jehovah God speaks. And even once again, as we get into this portion, because the past few weeks we've been reading a lot about the difference between the clean and the unclean. Mm-hmm. We've been reading about the things that pertain to holiness. So there is a difference between being clean and there's a difference between being clean and being holy. Right. And it's our responsibility to be both. But it's our responsibility to be holy all times and to be clean as much as possible, because there are going to be things that you do in your life that will cause you to become unclean. And making that separation between the unclean and the clean just means that you acknowledge when you are unclean and know how to make the proper separation from those things that are clean and also the things that are holy. And then when you become clean, then you know how to navigate throughout the community. So that's all it is when it comes to making a difference between the unclean and the clean. Just acknowledging the state of being that you are in and knowing how to navigate yourself, whether it pertains strictly to the holy things in the temple of God, or even just separating yourself from people overall. Right. So once again, those are the things that we read about in the past few weeks that we've been studying, and also once again learning about holiness and learning about the things that we are supposed to do and learning about the things that we are not supposed to do. And also within the time frame of what we have today, we're gonna do it more of like a open discussion as well, being that there are a lot of information to cover within this portion. But within the time frame that we have, we'll do like an open discussion. We'll ask some questions and allow people to ask questions as well. And, primarily between the chapters, answering some questions and all relating to the reading today, of course. We're just gonna focus on the reading and nothing else at this time. And also we do acknowledge that there will be a delay from those that are watching online that may have comments or answers or responses to certain questions, as well as questions that they may ask. So we'll do the best that we can to keep everything in line, because once again, we do acknowledge the delay, the latency that is there with the dialogue that may take place with those that are online. So once again, we are going to go into the book of Leviticus, beginning in chapter 21, verse 1.
Hallelujah.
Yeah.
And Yahweh said unto Moshe, speak unto the priests, the sons of Aharon, and say unto them, there shall none defile himself for the dead among his people.
So we're going to stop right there before we get on. So now, Jehovah God is speaking to Moses, and he's saying, say actually to the priests, and that's where the name of the portion comes in, Emor, which means say, saying to the priests, the sons of Aharon, or the sons of Aaron, is saying to them. And speaking of the priests, the word is Kohen in the Hebrew. Mm-hmm. And it's very specific here because it says, speak unto the priests, the sons of Aharon. Because as you read throughout the scriptures, there are Kohanim that do different things. Right. When you read in the book of Samuel and also in Chronicles, the sons of Dawid, the sons of King David were called Kohanim. Kohen is a minister. That was supposed to be a question, actually. But Kohen is a minister. Mm-hmm. So now specifically, these priests or these ministers are the ones out of the line of Aaron. Right. So these rules are specific for those that come out of the line of Aaron. Right. Because we know that Jehovah God also called the children of Israel a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. Right. So once again, the word Kohen or the word priest can go beyond just those that come out of the line of Aaron. So you have to know specifically who the priest that Jehovah God is speaking about. So these rules don't apply to all of the children of Israel, once again, even though Jehovah God calls the children of Israel a kingdom of priests. These rules that are given here are given to the priests that are of the sons of Aaron. That's why it specifically says that. We read in the book of Deuteronomy, and it was said earlier in the book of Ezekiel, it says the Kohanim Haluyim. Mm-hmm. It says the priests, the Levites, or actually more accurately translated, the priests that are of the Levites. Mm-hmm. That's where that term comes from. So even in the book of Deuteronomy, when we talk about the priests, the Levites, it actually should say the Levitical priests, to make a difference between the priests that are out of the sons of the king, or the priests or the ministers that have certain functions within the nation, and the priests that are of the line of Aaron. Mm-hmm. So once again, these rules are specific for the sons of Aaron. And it said that there shall none defile himself for the dead among his people. We didn't receive the instructions yet based on our reading, just going in order, on how someone can be defiled by the dead. We read about that specifically in the book of Numbers, chapter 19. Mm-hmm. Leviticus chapters 11 through 15, we received the instructions about uncleanness of all other forms. But when we get to Numbers chapter 19, we will see how a person can become defiled by the dead. And what are some of the ways that a person can become defiled by the dead?
Touching a dead body.
Touching a dead body. Walking on the grave.
Touching the bone of a dead person.
Touching the bone, and you said? Entering the room of where somebody died.
When they died.
Right. Entering the room, a tent. Right. Where somebody died, that room becomes unclean. Mm-hmm. So those are the ways that a person can become defiled by the dead. So the priests, the sons of Aaron, are told that they should not defile themselves in any of those manners. But it's going to give exceptions for the priests. Go ahead.
Except for his kin that is near unto him, for his mother, or for his father, or for his son and for his daughter, and for his brother, and for his sister, a virgin that is near unto him, that have had no husband, for her may he defile himself.
So the priests are allowed to defile themselves, meaning that they are allowed to come in contact with the dead body of these individuals: the mother, father, the son, the daughter, the brother, the sister that's a virgin that did not have a husband. What about his wife?
Maybe his sons were priests to take care of the wife.
But then that would be their mother. The priest is not allowed to defile himself with his mother, father.
But that was a high priest.
No, this is the priest.
Or the priest.
Right.
Somebody else, cousin or someone, they priests too.
But that wouldn't be the cousin. It would be the aunt in that case, right? But the question is posed.
If it's the priest's sons, they can because it's their mother, and you can. It said
Right.
except for the mother.
Right. So
That's what I said.
I know, but you confused them.
yeah, yeah, you did.
Wow, this is how
Yeah, your answer was confusing. Yeah,
you
yeah,
understand me?
I did understand you.
yeah, your answer was kind of confusing.
Oh my goodness.
Yes,
They sons.
But no, but the question specifically is what about
The wife.
The wife?
The wife.
Good question.
Right.
I don't know. It doesn't state.
It doesn't say. So he cannot defile himself with his wife. So now we gotta, and we're gonna read through a lot of things here. We gotta see that, the term of having choice is thrown out there a lot, but there are certain things that we just have no choice in. And it's not that Jehovah God is a cruel God. He's very compassionate.
Right.
We know that he's loving. He has loving kindness, but he has certain rules and regulations that those that are, as you read in Leviticus chapter 10, verse 3. When the sons of Aaron died, he said, those that are near to him,
That's right.
will he be sanctified, and in the presence of all people will he be honored. So the closer you are to God, the more rules you may have,
Right.
and the more rules you will have to be strict to.
Right.
So as much as the priest may love his wife, of course, that's his wife, that's the mother of his children, when she passes away, he is not allowed to defile himself with even his wife, because his duty is to God more than his family. And that's a responsibility that we all have to acknowledge, even being the children of Yisrael. Individually, our responsibility is to God more than our family. We do have responsibilities to our family, and God is compassionate for that. But once again, our responsibility is strictly to God more than our family. So it mentions specifically the people who he is able to defile himself by. Continue.
He shall not defile himself, being a chief man among his people, to profane himself. They shall not make baldness upon their head, neither shall they shave off the corners of their beard, nor make any cuttings in their flesh.
So these are also the instructions that we received when we read last week in Leviticus chapter 19 as well, that even among the children of Israel, that we're not allowed to make cuttings in our flesh, we're not allowed to make baldness upon ourselves, or even more the corners of our beards. All of these things were given to the children of Israel overall, but this, once again, is a manuscript that is given strictly to the priests. So we're reading everything in the book of Leviticus as one document, but think about it back then. There was a document given to the children of Israel. There was a document given to the priests. So just because there are some things that are reiterated for the children of Israel as well as the priests, it doesn't mean that now we read this here that the children of Israel are able to do those things.
Right.
The manuscript for the children of Israel was already given, and now this is a manuscript that's given strictly for the priests, the sons of Aaron. Also, another question: what about the daughters of Aaron? Are they allowed to defile themselves for anybody else besides the mother, father, son, daughter, brother, or sister?
You said the daughters of Aaron?
Yes.
They're not priests.
Why are they not priests?
Are they not priests?
Yeah.
Because they're not.
Because priests are men.
Okay. Why are they not? Speaking in English or even in Hebrew, why would they not be considered priestesses?
Because they just not. We don't have priestesses in our.
And it's not
We
that
have prophetess.
it's not that you're wrong, but in terms of what we're reading, these are instructions that are given to and it'll probably become more clear, but it's not that you're wrong. We're just asking open-ended questions. But the daughters of Aaron also have a responsibility too, being the daughters of Aharon.
Yeah, not to. Let me not say.
They also have responsibilities. So we could also consider that these rules here apply to them, because we're going to read later on, and once again, as we get later on, it'll,
They can eat the food.
right. They're part of that family.
Mm-hmm.
They're not allowed to present offerings, just like those, as we read later on in the chapter, that have a deformity are not allowed to present offerings. But the same rules that are here still will apply to the males that have a deformity, that they still will not be able to defile themselves.
Yeah, but
So their lineage is what they are. The function is based on, as you mentioned, the gender and their capabilities. So there's one set of rules based on their lineage, and then the other set of rules based on what they are able to do. But once again, these are just open-ended questions, just to think.
So can they defile themselves?
That's the question.
You got a response to your other question to the wife.
Uh-huh.
This is from Sister Adira. She said, is the priest not one with his wife? Maybe that's why his wife is not explicitly stated. A man leaves his father and his mother and cleaves to his wife, and they become one. She said, maybe.
Right. Which, that's not a bad answer. It's not a bad answer. Only thing is that God starts off by saying that he shall not defile himself for the dead among his people, except for his kin that is near to him, and then it specifically lays out people that he could defile himself for.
Correct.
If it wasn't given so specifically, then the answer could be more clear-cut that yes, to him and the wife were one. But being that and even went to his sister, and the sister specifically says that only if his sister is a virgin and she has not been married to anybody else.
Right.
So it's a lot of specifications given. So in a general case, yes, the man and the wife are one. But when God is speaking and he gets so specific with the other people, it sort of rules out certain people that were not mentioned. Mm-hmm. And once again, it's not a lack of compassion. It's just that the priest, as it later on says, because he's a chief man among the people, or as the word in the Hebrew, Baal, he's Lord among the people, his responsibility is greater than anybody else. So his level of defilement has to be, or his mindset in terms of defiling himself has to be greater than the regular population, because his function as a priest is greater than anybody else in the entire nation. So once again, this is not a job that he chose, or this is not a position that he chose. He was just born into this lineage, but he has to accept the fact that the responsibility of just being born within that lineage. So these are the things, and once again, being the children of Yisrael, we are bound by the covenant that Jehovah God made with us. Mm-hmm. Even though we were not born back in Mount Sinai. But God said he made that covenant with those who were standing there and those that come after.
Right.
So that's why when things happen in our lives, is because we're bound by that covenant, whether we like it or not. So we don't have as much choices as we think that we have. Continue.
Verse 6. They shall be holy unto their God, and not profane the name of their God. For the offerings of Jehovah made by fire, the bread of their God they do offer, therefore they shall be holy. They shall not take a woman that is a harlot, or profane. Neither shall they take a woman put away from her husband, for he is holy unto his God. Thou shalt sanctify him therefore, for he offereth the bread of thy God. He shall be holy unto thee, for I, Jehovah, who sanctify you, am holy.
So even being who he was born, or the lineage he was born into, he's not allowed to just marry anybody that he wants to also.
Teach us.
Once again, these are specifications for the priests, the sons of Aaron. So the question we'll get to is, what is a profane woman? So people have a chance, so we could catch up on that level. But it says that he shall not take a woman that is a harlot or profane, neither shall they take a woman put away from her husband, for he is holy unto his God. So who is he allowed to marry?
A virgin.
He's allowed to marry a virgin.
Mm-hmm. He's allowed to marry the wife of a priest.
The widow of a priest.
Whoa.
So that's where we know where you're coming from, but your response is usually confusing. Yeah. Your responses are confusing, even though earlier you was definitely correct. He was correct. It was just the way that you said it. So the priest is allowed to marry a virgin or the widow of a priest, and he's only allowed, as we read it earlier in Ezekiel, he's only allowed to marry a virgin of the children of Israel. He's not allowed to marry a foreign woman.
Talk to us.
So once again, these specifications for priests are very great. The sanctification that's upon them is just very great. So it's not something that it should just be simply taken. So once again, even today when people call themselves priests, they have to consider how much responsibility they have.
That's right.
Even those that are chief men among the people, they may not have to follow these specifications, but they have to also realize how important their role is. Also, this next verse.
And the daughter of any priest, if she profane herself by playing the harlot, she profaneth her father. She shall be burnt with fire.
So take 5 seconds, because we already been 15 minutes into this lesson already. Take 5 seconds to just think about somebody being burnt in fire.
Alive.
Without oil.
Talk to us.
So time's up. Now think about what did she do that caused her to be burnt in fire?
She has sex.
Simply, see, now you're getting better. Because other people, I was expecting other answers. Simply, she just had sex. That's so
Before her time.
Before being married.
So sexual activity is not as simple as people take it to be. Mm-hmm. If she was 55 and her father was 79, would she be burnt in fire?
It said the daughter.
If she was 55 and her father is 79, would she be burnt in fire?
Yes. If she played the harlot in her
father's house. So age has nothing to do with it.
That's a fact.
So we cannot take sex so lightly that we think that young people cannot do it when they want to, but older people can do it when they want to. We read a whole list of sexual activities that are prohibited. We know that we know that there's definitely one sexual act that is accepted by God, a man and his wife. Anything else, all that secret stuff, all that other stuff, you're playing with fire, as we just seen here. Literally. And once again, we have to consider how serious this thing is. Also consider, even though it doesn't mention, it doesn't mention a punishment for the man that she played the harlot with, the man has to also consider the fact that he caused somebody to be burnt in fire. Right. And he has to live with that, unless you have no conscience whatsoever. So it also impacts upon the mind of men to not just cause the daughters of the children of Yisrael to be harlots as well. Even if they may cause themselves, even if you say, well, they are that doesn't mean that you have to be that also. As Chief Saul said last week, you don't have to be on a harlot's list, because you don't have to add to the fire that she's going to be burnt with. And also, when you cause people to sin, there's also responsibility on you as well. So once again, simply she was burned for having sex. We can add the other stuff, which is definitely there before her time. Her father didn't know about it. She was a max. She was simply burned for having sex. So we have to consider the sexual activity that we do today. And we live in a world where sex education is about disease prevention and birth control. But when it comes to Torah, sex education should just be about self-control, not birth control. Continue.
And the priest that is highest among his brethren, upon whose head the anointing oil is poured, and that is consecrated to put on the garment, shall not let the hair of his head go loose, nor rend his clothes. Neither shall he go into any dead body, nor defile himself for his father or for his mother. Neither shall he go out of the sanctuary, nor profane the sanctuary of his God. For the consecration of the anointing oil of his God is upon him. I am Jehovah.
So don't think that because it wasn't mentioned about the wife for the priest that it seemed like a harsh thing, or even as we're talking about it, it's harsh. The high priest is not allowed to defile himself for anybody. Right. Mother or father. So even when it came to the priest, and we said that he couldn't defile himself for the wife, the high priest is not allowed to defile himself for his father or his mother.
That's right.
If his father is dying, he cannot be in the room with his father. Just think about that. The high priest is not allowed to even be in the room just in case his father passes away in the same room. So he would not hear the last words of his father or his mother.
Well, his father is the high priest.
Not always. Not always. Yeah, not always. Not always. Because we read also, like we had... I
mean, in the natural sense of the way things were supposed to go.
Right. His father would have been a high priest. But it can also go... Because if, like we read in the time of King David, he had Abiathar, who was high priest, and eventually Sadok became the high priest because Abiathar messed up. So if people mess up, they get fired from their position. And then it could go on to someone else of a different lineage. But as you said, in the normal course of things, his father, but even his father being a high priest, once again, he would not be, because he would be a priest at that time. He wouldn't be high priest yet. But a high priest would not be allowed to tend to the body of his father or his mother.
So the question is, I don't know if this is
Yeah.
open. So
Yeah.
would it be that he became the high priest after he gets anointed to be high priest?
Yes.
So then technically he's not high priest
Right.
until he gets anointed.
Anointed, right. He's not high priest until he's anointed.
So then technically he could take care of his father.
No, but I was saying if he is high priest and his father happened to not be high priest,
Oh, gotcha.
right, he would not be able to be in the room of his dying father.
I hope I didn't
No, he would not be able to be in the room of his dying father or his dying mother or his dying brother or his dying sister or his dying wife.
Dog.
He would not be able to be in the room with those individuals
Right.
as they are dying. So think about us today. You know, we have people in the hospitals, or you have parents that are sick, and you tend to them. Just think about the high priest does not have the ability to do the things that we do. So just once again, before people start jumping into certain shoes, just think about how great that responsibility is before you jump into those shoes. Continue.
Verse 13. And he shall take a wife in her virginity, a widow or one divorced or a profane woman or a harlot, these shall he not take. But a virgin of his own people shall he take to wife. He shall not profane his seed among his people, for I am Yahweh who sanctify him.
So he cannot be a person that is all over the place. So once again, he cannot profane his seed among his people. So he cannot be one that, once again, profaning the seed being that he's loose.
Right.
So once again, there were restrictions upon the high priest. There were restrictions upon the priests. We don't have any answers in terms of what a profane woman is. That may have popped up in the chat before we continue on. Because once again, it would not be the same as a harlot.
He said any answers in the chat.
A harlot and a profane woman would be two different things. Else they wouldn't be. If they were the same thing, it would just say one as opposed to the other. But it was specified that he's not allowed to marry a harlot or a profane woman or a divorcee.
Right.
And even for the high priest, he's not allowed to marry a widow as well.
But our priests are allowed to have wives.
But
Unlike these people.
right, priests are allowed to have wives. Yes, they're allowed to get married. Unlike some denominations where priests are supposed to be celibate for the rest of their lives and
Right.
end up not being celibate for the rest of their lives
Right.
And doing egregious things.
because they're not celibate for the rest of their lives.
That's facts.
Continue.
Verse 16. And Yahweh spoke unto Moshe, saying, Speak unto Aharon, saying, Whosoever he be of thy seed throughout their generations that hath a blemish, let him not approach to offer the bread of his God. For whatsoever man he be that hath a blemish, he shall not approach a blind man or lame, or he that hath anything maimed or anything too long. For a man that is broken-footed or broken-handed, or crook-backed or a dwarf, or that hath his eye overspread, or his scabbed or scurvy, or hath his stones crushed, no man of the seed of Aharon the priest that hath a blemish shall come nigh to offer the offerings of Yahweh made by fire. He hath a blemish. He shall not come nigh to offer the bread of his God.
And once again, that may seem harsh, but Jehovah God requires certain things. And that's just the way it is. So a priest, and once again, as I said, whosoever he be of thy seed throughout that generation that have a blemish, it didn't mention the word priest there, but anybody of their generations that have these blemishes, they're not allowed to approach the altar to offer anything. They are allowed to eat of the offerings, but they're not allowed to present any offerings. No matter how much they may want to do their job, being of the lineage of Aaron, the fact that they have something broken, the fact that they may be blind, the fact that they may be lame, the fact that they may have any of these deformities or disabilities, it doesn't mean that they are not still required to be holy also. Because being the sons of Aaron, they're still supposed to be holy. They're just not allowed to approach the altar to present any offerings. But they're allowed to eat of the offerings, of course, when they are clean. So that's why the question also came in, do these same rules apply in terms of the defilement when it comes to the daughters of Aaron as well? Because we know that they're not allowed to approach the altar. But once again, the lineage of Aaron still had a responsibility to have a level of holiness that is greater than anybody else because of their lineage. So once again, any of the sons of Aaron or any of the seed of Aaron throughout their generation that have any of these blemishes, they're not allowed to approach. But once again, they are allowed to eat of the food, as it says here.
He may eat the bread of his God, both of the most holy and of the holy. Only he shall not go into the veil, nor come nigh unto the altar, because he hath a blemish, that he profane not my holy places. For I am Yahweh who sanctify them. So Moshe spoke to Aharon and to his sons and to all the children of Israel.
So once again, they are allowed to eat of the food, eat of the offerings, what of the holy, because there's, even when we read in the beginning of the book of Leviticus, there are offerings that are considered holy, there are offerings that are considered most holy. So just the meal offerings, which are considered most holy, they can eat those. Or they're just the regular offerings, the peace offering, they're allowed to eat those. But they're not allowed to offer anything because they have their deformity or they have their blemish that is within them. So these are, once again, that chapter was just the specifications for the lineage of Aharon. And we're going to sort of breeze through the next chapter, but any question? Say that again?
Is he a priest?
I would say yes, he's a priest.
Yeah, because the sons of
Yeah.
the priest's sons are priests.
Even if he's winning?
Yes.
Yeah.
He's just
just
not
can't
allowed to
approach
do
the
that.
altar.
That's why the question was asked. We don't use the word, of course, we don't see the word at all. We don't use the word priestess, but they are still of the lineage of Aharon. And once again, we see rules for for the daughters of Aharon, especially they're not allowed to play the harlot. None of the daughters of the children of Israel are allowed to play the harlot, because for everybody else it's stoning.
Right.
But for the priest or the lineage of the priest,
Burning.
it's burning. Once again, it just shows the degree of holiness that they are supposed to have. Once again, the closer we get to God, the more sanctified we're supposed to make his name, and in the presence of all people, we're supposed to honor him. So even those of us today that we acknowledge ourselves as the children of Yisrael, and there are people out there that don't acknowledge themselves as the children of Israel, that don't know Yehovah God, we have to have a certain decorum in the sight of people because we are closer to God.
Hallelujah.
We come here, we worship on the Sabbath day, we eat clean supposedly, we wear the clothes that we're supposed to wear, we wear fringes,
Amen.
we do certain things. So therefore our closest to Yehovah God is more than anybody else. So the closer we get, we have to be more mindful of the things that we do. And that's what that portion was about, even though it was about the priests. But everybody else still had to learn the rules of the priests because they also have to know how to conduct themselves. So this chapter 22 speaks about the blemishes. No, we're going to start reading first, and then later on it's going to talk about the blemishes of the animals that will be presented on the altar. Continue.
Chapter 22, hallelujah.
Hallelujah.
And Yahweh spoke unto Moshe, saying, Speak unto Aharon and to his sons, that they separate themselves from the holy things of the children of Israel, which they hallow unto me, and that they profane not my holy name. I am Yahweh.
So once again, now it's talking about the actual offerings that will be presented. So they have to make sure, so the children of Israel have to make sure that they hallow the things that they're presenting. Once the offerings are presented, the priest's responsibility is to make sure that those things remain holy.
Right.
That they don't contaminate those things.
There you go, that's
because
the word.
people do the best that they can. They keep themselves clean, and they hallow the things that they're going to bring as an offering. They present it to the priests, whether it's the things that are going to be presented on the altar, whether it's the sanctification of the firstborn animal, whether it's of the tithes that they separate. The people do their best to make sure that they present the things that they're supposed to present before God in a holy manner. So now the priests are charged with the responsibility of making sure that they maintain the holiness of those things that are being presented by the people. Continue.
Say unto them, Whosoever he be of all your seed throughout your generations that approacheth unto the holy things, which the children of Israel hallow unto Yahweh, having his uncleanness upon him, that soul shall be cut off from before me.
So
I am Yahweh.
So that priest that does not hallow the things that the children of Israel present, that priest will be cut off. So that priest's job is not forever, so to speak. That job that they're supposed to hold on a high regard can be taken away from them, and they can also have their lives taken away from them.
That's right.
As a result, because they're not making a separation between the holy and the common, which is something that Yehovah God considers very important. Making a difference between the holy and the common, and also between the unclean and the clean. Continue. And these are just examples of the things that people become unclean by, that if the priest makes sure that he doesn't separate himself when he does this, causes him to get cut off. Continue.
What man soever of the seed of Aharon is a leper, or hath an issue, he shall not eat the holy things until he be clean. And whosoever toucheth anyone that is unclean by the dead, or from whomsoever the flow of sea goeth out, or whosoever toucheth any swarming thing, whereby he may be made unclean, or a man of whom he may take uncleanness, whatsoever uncleanness he hath, the soul that toucheth any such shall be unclean until the even, and shall not eat of the holy things unless he bathe his flesh in water. and when the sun is down, he shall be clean. And afterward he may eat of the holy things, because it is his bread.
It still belongs unto him, but your whole God is saying that when you are not clean, when the priest is not clean, also, just to make it, anybody, the children of Aharon, can remember the daughters of Aharon are allowed to eat of these offerings as well. They have to make sure that they're clean.
Right.
So it specifies certain things. So Leviticus 11, it makes the difference between the clean beast and the unclean beast. When you eat an unclean animal, you're unclean until the evening. You have to bathe yourself first, of course, and you become clean. You become clean in the evening. Numbers 19, that we just spoke about, you become unclean by the dead by various means. A woman, as we read in Leviticus chapter 12, she has a child. For a male, 7 days. For the female, 14 days, and then there's some other days at the end of it for a total of 40 for the male child and 80 for the if she has a female child. Leviticus 13 and 14 talks about leprosy, which you read here. A leper is unclean until the priest deems them. The leper is unclean until the priest deems them clean, and then there's a certain procedure that they have to go through for their cleanliness. Leviticus 15 categories. You have a STD, and you have that flow. You're unclean for those period of time until that flow stops. Then you count 7 days afterwards. Then you become clean. Right. Or a man, as it says here, the flow seed comes out of him, whether he's with his wife or something that happens at night. He has to bathe his flesh in water, and he's clean in the evening. And also at the end of Leviticus 15, a woman, when she's on a menstrual cycle, she's unclean for the 7 days unless she goes over that time. So this is just a summary of what we just read here, that if a person, an individual of the children of Aharon are unclean by any of these methods, they are not allowed to eat of the holy things because they're supposed to make that separation. That is very important for us to understand that separation. Continue.
That which dieth of itself or is torn of beasts, he shall not eat to defile himself therewith. I am Yehovah.
And that's also something that all of us are commanded not to do anyway. Because once again, this manuscript is given directly to the priests or the sons of Aharon. But once again, we've already received that information from Leviticus chapter 11 as well, and also Leviticus chapter 17, that if an animal dies of itself, or if it's torn by a beast, or just torn, the word by beast is actually added here in the English translations, it's not there in the Hebrew. So if it just dies, or if it's torn, which the sense is by beast, but if it's just torn by any method, and it dies by any other method than you slaughtering or somebody slaughtering for food, is not to be eaten. And you become unclean when you eat of it. And you have to bathe your flesh, and you become clean. So it specifies here even earlier, so we can definitely equate sundown with evening. Okay. Within 2 verses, it said that you're unclean until the evening, and it says at sundown you're clean, which means that once again, sundown and evening are all the same thing. When the sun goes down, the evening comes in, you become clean. That's it. New day begins. Continue.
They shall therefore keep my charge, lest they bear sin for it, and die therein if they profane it. I am Yehovah who sanctify them. There shall no common man eat of the holy thing. A tenant of a priest or a hired servant shall not eat of the holy thing. But if a priest buy any soul the purchase of his money, he may eat of it. And such as are born in his house, they may eat of his bread. And if a priest's daughter be married unto a common man, she shall not eat of that which is set apart from the holy things. But if a priest's daughter be a widow or divorced and have no child, and is returned unto her father's house, as in her youth, she may eat of her father's bread. But there shall no common man eat thereof.
So once again, the offerings that are presented by the children of Yisrael, the sin offerings, there's a part that can be eaten by the sons of Aharon. The peace offerings is a part that can be eaten by them as well. Burnt offerings are completely burnt on the altar, so nobody's eating anything. The meal offering can be eaten as well. So it mentions that, of course, any of the priests could eat of it, and it mentions the daughter of a priest or any of the daughters of Aharon, that they can eat of it, but if she becomes married to somebody else, and consequently if she marries somebody that is not a priest, then she's not allowed to eat of the food or eat of the holy things. But if she gets divorced, or if she becomes a widow and she returns to her father's house and goes under the auspices, if that's the proper word, of her father, and she had no child, then she's allowed to eat of the offerings once again. Once again, these instructions are just very detailed, and they're maybe on a higher level that we consider today, living in a liberal world. But Yehovah God just considers everything to be strict. And it doesn't mean, once again, that Yehovah has no compassion. He's making a strict difference between the holy and the common. And that's how we have to look at it. So we have to elevate our minds and think about what holiness actually is, and not just think about what holiness is to us. It's about holiness that Yehovah God considers. Continue.
And if a man eat of the holy thing through error, Then he shall put the fifth part thereof unto it, and shall give unto the priest the holy thing.
And that, once again, if anybody, so it's specifically, so if somebody is unclean, whether they know of it or not, and they defile something that is holy, they have to replace that and add the fifth part of it. We read earlier, and we also read later in the book of Leviticus, if somebody steals something that is holy or damages something that is holy, they have to replace it and add the fifth part of the value of it.
Right.
That's just the punishment of it. So it's not just it's not going to be a one-to-one thing. It has to be an addition because people have to feel the brunt of the wrong that they have done.
Right.
Continue.
And they shall not profane the holy things of the children of Israel, which they set apart unto Yahweh, and so cause them to be the iniquity that bringeth guilt when they eat their holy things. For I am Yahweh who sanctify them.
So once again, the priests are charged with making sure that they make that strict separation, that they don't defile the holy things that the children of Israel bring up, and the children of Israel, the rest of us, have to make sure that we don't defile any of the things that we are bringing up. And that's, of course, in a society where we are allowed to bring offerings. Of course, we're not allowed to bring offerings today. We know of that, but these instructions are still pertinent to us because we still have to learn the difference between the holy and the common. And there are certain things that are read here. There's certain things about family life that are read here that, once again, are not common in the way that we live life today. But as we mentioned, once again, the priest's daughter is not allowed to play the harlot. And also, if she married, she could return back to her father's house. These are just the process of family life that just took place among the children of Israel. And then the next section is going to talk about the deformities of animals and any deformity of an animal, whether it's blind, lame, or any type of limp or anything like that, or you have to check it out thoroughly. If it has any lesions or anything within it, it is not allowed to be offered or presented as an offering, whether a burnt offering or definitely a sin offering or peace offering. Any animal that has any of these blemishes are not to be presented as an offering to God. And even if a foreigner is bringing an animal, those animals still have to be thoroughly checked out, that there's no blemishes upon them as well. But it says in verse 24, let's read verse 24.
That which have its stones crushed, his stones bruised or crushed, or torn or cut, he shall not offer unto Yahweh. Neither shall you do thus in your land.
Actually, that was my fault. It's supposed to go up one verse, 23.
Either a bullock or a lamb that hath anything too long or too short, that mayest thou offer for a free will offering. But for a vow, it shall not be accepted.
Just to read that, we know we're not doing offerings today, but there's a difference between a free will offering and a vow offering. Mm-hmm. So there are certain blemishes that are allowed for a free will offering, but if you presented the offering as a vow, then it still has not allowed to have any blemish or any deformities within it. And then it goes on to say that when a foreigner is bringing up something, you have to make sure that there's no corruption in the animal as well. Then towards the end of this chapter, it mentions that when you have any of these animals, that there are a lot of animals that it says you have to offer it within its first year. But the specification that we read towards the end of this chapter is that you allow it to be 7 days under its mother, to be fed by its mother, and then the 8th day onward, you can present it as an offering. So there are no offerings of animals that are presented within the 7 days of their life.
Right.
From the 8th day onward, you can do so. And then there are offerings that you could present of an animal of almost any age. And then later on says here that you cannot offer it and its mother on the same day as well. And because you have to sanctify the name of Jehovah God, read the last two verses, 32, actually 31.
And ye shall keep my commandments and do them, I am Yahweh. Ye shall not profane my holy name, but I will be hallowed among the children of Israel. I am Yahweh who hallow you, that brought you out of the land of Egypt to be your God. I am Yahweh.
And that goes for everybody.
Right.
All of the children of Israel were brought out of the land of Egypt, not just the priests. Chapter 21 specifically was for the sons or the descendants of Aaron. 22 was a mixture of the descendants of Aaron as well as everybody else. Everybody that is, if you claim to be brought out of the land of Egypt, you're not allowed to profane the name of Jehovah God. That just comes, and even if you're not of the children of Israel, as we'll find out as we get to the end of this portion, you're still not allowed to profane the name of Jehovah God.
Right.
But we are bound by the covenant that Jehovah God has made between him and us, that we cannot profane his name in any way, so therefore we have to hallow his name. And as we read last week, as Chief Saul went through his portion, that we have to be holy because Jehovah God is holy.
Amen. So
we have to understand or try to learn what it is to be a holy people. So there are a lot of things that we tend to do today, once again, living in a liberal world, that we would not be allowed to do, living in the land of Yisrael. There are a lot of freedoms that we are afforded to today that we would not be afforded to living in the land of Yisrael. So a lot of us are fortunate, for lack of a better term, for being able to get away with a lot of the free speech that we're allowed to get away with today, and a lot of free activity that we're allowed to get away with today.
That's right.
Free speech and free sexual activity would not be taking place in the land of Yisrael. When you had a priesthood and judges and leadership doing the things that they're supposed to do, that would not be taking place in the land of Yisrael. Free speech is not, that's in the Constitution of the United States of America. Amendment number 1 for those that have pledged allegiance and had to learn the Constitution. There are some of us that, of course, are just born here, just by virtue of just being born here. We didn't have to learn the Constitution like that. But that is First Amendment right according to the U.S. Constitution. It is not a First Amendment right according to Torah. Torah and U.S. Constitution are just two totally different things.
That's right.
And once again, the liberal attitude, the liberal speech, and the liberal actions that we take today would not be tolerated. When you live in a society where you see people burned and stoned, we would tend to do less things.
That's right.
And these burnings, and see, even considering the burning, because we took 5 seconds to think about it, if you thought of that in a cynical manner, then that's just a different problem that you have. These punishments of people being burned and stoned is not to make you feel happy.
Right.
It's not for you to be joyful. It's not for you to see it and to see guts and blood and think that that's a good thing. It's supposed to warn you that that could be you. So the things that you do, once again, it's supposed to warn you so that you don't go forth and think you could do the same things. Because once again, we live in a society where people tend to do things because they're going against leadership and going against teachers and things like that. But when you do your activity, the only person that is there is you and the person you did the activity with. So when people do things and they say, well, I'm going to do these sexual activities because the teacher said and the leader said we shouldn't be doing this, the teachers and the leaders are not there in the room with you or in the car with you, on the playground, the staircase with you. It's you and God at that point. So don't think about who you're trying to go against when you do certain things. Just think that God is watching at all times.
That's right.
And that's the bottom line. And once you start considering God more, then you start considering leadership less. And that's, now, Maria Ronnie spoke about it, don't think about leadership so much. Think about your standing with God. Think about what God thinks of you. God is your leader.
That's a fact.
God is your spiritual leader. That is the one you should be following. That's the one that can see you in every place that you are, doing all of these things that you're not supposed to be doing. Chapter 23 is going to talk about the appointed times of Jehovah God that's given unto us. Continue.
And Jehovah spoke unto Moshe, saying, Speak unto the children of Israel, and say unto them, The appointed seasons of Jehovah, which ye shall proclaim to be holy convocations, even these are my appointed seasons.
And some of the translations may say these are the feasts. Feast is not a bad translation, but the word moed, with the word in Hebrew, or moadai, which is my appointed seasons, or it says my feast. The Middle English term of feast, because we think of feast today based on the later English term, feast, we think about eating. Middle English, feast is a religious observance. When you think of Catholicism, there's various types of feasts that represent saints and events that took place in Christianity. So the feast, the translation feast is not wrong. It's only because we think of the word feast as we think of it today as a bunch of food, or a gathering where there's food. Once again, but the Middle English term of feast is a religious occasion. So these are the spiritual occasions, so to speak, or the appointed seasons of Jehovah God that are given unto us. So these are the days that we are supposed to be observing as they are written within this chapter that we are supposed to consider holy, because as it says here, these are holy convocations. Mikra'e Kodesh, as it says in Hebrew, meaning these are days that we call holy, or that Jehovah God calls holy, so we have to call them holy and acknowledge them as holy gatherings, holy meetings, holy convocations. Continue.
6 days shall work be done, but on the 7th day is a Shabbat of solemn rest, a holy convocation. Ye shall do no manner of work. It is a Shabbat unto Jehovah in all your dwellings.
So in all of our dwellings, no matter where we live throughout the earth, the 7th day of the week is going to be holy, and on this day we do no manner of work. And we make no excuses for it. Once again, in Genesis chapter 2, it says, after Jehovah God created the heavens and the earth, just paraphrasing, and he saw that everything was good, he ceased from all of his work on the 7th day, and he blessed the 7th day and made the 7th day a holy day. So this day is always going to be holy. This day is always going to come in the seventh day of every week, regardless of whether people call it Saturday, whether people call it Sabado, whether people call it Semedi, or whatever language they may call this seventh day of the week. The seventh day of the week is the Sabbath day. And even in all of these translations that we see all throughout the world, that Sabado, Semedi, and all of that still means Sabbath. So we cannot start to confuse when the Sabbath day occurs, because the Sabbath day existed before we were born. The Sabbath day will exist after we die. And we just have to make sure that we do the best that do all that we can in keeping the Sabbath day holy. So we have 6 days that we can do all of our work. We read about that in Exodus chapter 20 in the 10 Commandments. You have 6 days to labor and do all your work, but the seventh day is the Sabbath for Jehovah God, and you shall do no manner of work in it. You, your son, your daughter, nobody is out to work on the Sabbath day, and therefore we have to make sure that we keep this day holy in all of our generations and all of our dwellings, and without any excuses. And as it goes on within this chapter, it goes on to talk about Passover, which is not a day, but it takes place on the 14th day at dusk on the first day of the month, which we observed almost a month ago at this point. And the 15th day of the first month. And once again, as it goes, just read verse 4.
These are the appointed seasons of Yahweh, even holy convocations which he shall proclaim in their appointed seasons.
So the appointed seasons, meaning they take place at a certain time,
right,
based on just certain occurrences. The Sabbath day, once again, the seventh day of the week. We follow a Hebrew calendar which goes according to the lunar cycle, or the lunar solar cycle. So some years there'll be 13 months just to keep everything aligned with the earth going around the sun. And that's how you keep everything in its appointed season. And the beginning of the month is based on the new moon. So on the 14th day of the first month, you have Yahweh's Passover. And on the 15th day of that same month is what? Oh, that was actually.
I was waiting. I thought you were and on the 15th.
No, that's for him to
and on the 15th day of the same month is the feast of unleavened bread unto Yahweh. 7 days ye shall eat unleavened bread, and the first day ye shall have a holy convocation. Ye shall do no manner of servile work. Ye shall bring an offering made by fire unto Yahweh 7 days. And the 7th day is a holy convocation. Ye shall do no manner of servile work.
And the template of doing no servile work, we read in Exodus chapter 12, it said, no manner of work shall be done, save what every man shall eat. And in Deuteronomy chapter 16, it also said once again that no manner of work should be done on the 15th day of the first month, nor on the 21st day of the first month, which is together are the first and seventh day of the Feast of Unleavened Bread. Once again, feast is just in this case here, the word chag, which is translated as feast, is actually a festival. So once again, it's not all about eating, but it's a festival. It's a joyous occasion. People, we know what festivals are. Later on, festivals got condensed into the word feast, and then later on it got condensed from festival to fest, and then those of us that are born or know of the other part of, or the lower part of the Caribbean Sea, we call it a fete. And that's what these occasions are. So you could call it the fete of unleavened bread, or the festival of unleavened bread. These are days that we're supposed to enjoy. These are days, and once again, in the Middle English, a feast is a religious occasion. Yes.
Can you explain that there is no such thing as like Passover days? People confuse the Feast of Unleavened Bread with
Passover. Right. So as it says here, it says on the first month, on the 14th day of the month at dusk is Yahweh's Passover. The Passover is the offering that takes place on the 14th day at dusk. So Passover is not a day. Passover takes place on the 14th day at dusk. I thought somebody else was.
The days of CHOKMAH.
And the Chag, right. The 15th day to the 21st day is the CHOKMAH, or the Feast of Unleavened Bread. And those are actual days. And the first day, which is the 15th day of the month, is a holy convocation. And the 7th day is a holy convocation. Then as we go on in verse 9, it's going to specify that when we enter into the land, just once again, just to keep the flow going, we're going to present an offering to God, and this is done on a yearly basis. Then there's an offering of the new grain that takes place. There are certain offerings that come forth with that when you bring forth that new grain. And then on the 14th verse, read that.
And ye shall eat neither bread nor parched corn nor fresh ears until this selfsame day, until ye have brought the offering of your God. It is a statute forever throughout your generations,
and once
in
again,
all your dwellings.
The confusion with this is just, it basically means that you are not allowed to eat of the new grain that comes up in the next year or within that year until you bring an offering of the ground. So you present your offering to God first, then you're allowed to partake of the rest of the grain from the ground. So when barley comes up, you present your offering to God first, then you can eat the rest of the barley that comes up after. That's basically what that line is saying. So today the first goes to Jehovah God. Today we buy packets of flour in stores, stuff like that. So we have no control over that, but we still have to eat in the lands of our dispersion. And then it goes on to talk about the period of time that we are in now. What is the counting for today for Chief Mekabadi to do that? 21, because the next verses from 15 all the way down is talking about the counting that would take place after you bring that offering when we are in the land of the 50 days or the 7 weeks plus 1 day, which will lead us into Shavuot, which is the Feast of Weeks, or Chag Shavuot, as you would say it in Hebrew. And it says in verse 21 and on down.
And ye shall make proclamation on the selfsame day, there shall be a holy convocation unto you. Ye shall do no manner of servile work. It is a statute forever in all your dwellings throughout your generations.
So therefore, no matter where we dwell, we still have to keep Chag Shavuot, or figure out a way to keep Chag Shavuot, even though we're not presenting an offering of the grain and counting from the offering of the grain.
Right.
It says here that we have to still keep it as a statute forever in all your dwelling throughout all your generations. So as a community, we just have to figure out a way to keep Shavuot, just like we have to keep everything else. And we'll talk about that more towards the end of the chapter as well. Verse 22.
And when you reap the harvest of your land, thou shalt not wholly reap the corn of thy field, neither shalt thou gather the gleaning of thy harvest. Thou shalt leave them for the poor and for the stranger. I am Yehovah your God.
And that may seem to be inserted within the chapter talking about appointed seasons, but the appointed seasons are still dealing with the ground as well.
Right.
So Jehovah God is teaching us how to still deal with the ground that he gives us. That it doesn't, he's reminding us that it doesn't belong to us. So once again, when we live in a society where we're always dependent on God, but when you live in a society where you're dependent on the ground and the produce of the ground, which comes from God, your prayers tend to be more fervent because you're focusing more on God blessing the crop. When you go to a store, you take things for granted. Right. But what God is saying that the edges of your territory, you don't touch that. Leave that for those that are passing by, those that are poor. Give them an opportunity to eat. And it also teaches us today that we have to be mindful of the poor as well. You have extra, save that extra for somebody else. I know, Chief Uziel used to mention a lot about collecting cans and just leaving it out there for people to pass by, let them take it. You're already making money. So you could separate your cans to make it easier for people that are passing by. That's just examples of things that we can do today. Or just have a couple of dollars in your wallet that is set aside. So if somebody's pass by asking you for $1, they don't have to see you pull out the hundreds. Go to the section of your wallet that just has the dollars and just give them that. Absolutely. Don't show them the hundreds and the 20s, because then that may create a different problem, and one of the two of y'all may be in the news. So just have a separate section in your wallet or a pocket just for the singles or the coins that you're going to give to somebody. The rest of this chapter talks about the other appointed seasons, talks about on the first day of the 7th month, which is, that was a question for everybody else, not for you.
Oh, sorry.
That's Yom Teruah.
Yom Teruah. The day of the memorial proclaimed with the blast of the horns that takes place on the first day of the 7th month, which is also a holy convocation. Let's go to verse 26.
And Yehovah spoke unto Moshe, saying, Howbeit, on the 10th day of this 7th month is the day of atonement. There shall be a holy convocation unto you, and ye shall afflict your souls, and ye shall bring an offering made by fire unto Yehovah. Ye shall do no manner of work in that same day. For it is the day of atonement, to make atonement for you before Yehovah your God. For whatsoever soul it be that shall not be afflicted in that same day, he shall be cut off from his people. And whatsoever soul it be that doeth any manner of work in the same day, that soul will I destroy from among his people. Ye shall do no manner of work. It is a statute forever throughout your generations in all your dwellings. It shall be unto you a Shabbat of solemn rest. Ye shall afflict your souls in the 9th day of the month at even. From even unto even ye shall keep your Shabbat.
And go to Psalm 35. I know we're going to do stuff real quick. Go to Psalm 35, verse 13, because people have a confusion in terms of how do we afflict our souls, which is still an improper translation, but we'll deal with that translation as it is, but just to get a better definition of what afflicting yourself is, Psalm 35, verse 13.
But as for me, when they were sick, my clothing was sackcloth. I afflicted my soul with fasting.
He afflicted his soul with?
Fasting.
He afflicted his soul with?
Fasting.
He afflicted his soul with?
Fasting.
So going back to Leviticus chapter 23, how do we afflict ourselves?
Fasting.
No question besides that. Verse 33 talks about the Feast of Tabernacles, or the Feast of Booths, which takes place from the 15th day of the 7th month. The first day we also have booths to dwell in. It is also a holy convocation. And then it doesn't, the 7th day of that, just to quell some of the confusion, the 7th day of the Feast of Booths is not the holy day. It's the following day,
right,
which is called Shemini Atzeret, which is called the day, which is also known as translated as the 8th day of solemn assembly. Solemn in Middle English means joyous. Today, solemn means sad, quiet. So once again, these are not improper translations. It's just you have to know what era these words were translated in. So a solemn assembly, based on the translation here, is a joyous occasion. It's not a sad occasion. It's not a day to be quiet. It's a day to rejoice before God. So the 8th day of solemn assembly, once again, is a joyous occasion. So once again, we read these words, and we get the translations based on that. And it mentioned also towards the end of the chapter that they took on the first day, the fruit of goodly trees, the branches of palm trees, and the boughs of thick trees, and willows of the brook, and they rejoiced before Jehovah God for 7 days, meaning that they take these items and build a booth. When we read in the book of Ezra, chapter 7, we read that that's what they took to build a booth. Because booths, as we were dwelling in the wilderness or dwelling in the desert, we observed this Feast of Booths because Jehovah God wants us to be reminded of how we dwelt in the desert. And as we were traveling, we just took palm trees, we took various trees, chopped down, put it together to build portable houses as we transported ourselves throughout the desert. And that's why Jehovah God is reminding us to keep these seasons for, once again, the Sabbath days, to remember that Jehovah God created the heavens and the earth for 6 days and ceased from all work on the 7th day, and he blessed the 7th day. That's why we keep the Sabbath day. Passover is to remember that Jehovah God passed over all of Egypt, slain the firstborn of man and beast, and he brought us out with great deliverance. We keep the Feast of Unleavened Bread to remember what we ate coming out of Egypt. Shavuot is to remember that Jehovah God gets the first of everything that we receive from the ground. And the day of the blast of the horn is just an alarm to warn us of that 7th month. The Day of Atonement is allowing us an opportunity to have our sins atoned for, to have our sins covered, to renew ourselves, refresh ourselves. And the Feast of Tabernacles to remember once again how Jehovah God allowed us to be transported throughout the desert. Leviticus chapter 24, and I don't know if there were any questions along the way, but we'll get to that when we get to the end because we are actually at the end of this portion. Leviticus chapter 24 starts off by talking about the candlestick or the menorah that is within the tent of meeting, or later on in the temple of God, that is lit from evening until morning by the priest every night from evening to morning, because the responsibility of that is for light. But the children of Israel's responsibility, all of us, is to make sure that there's olive oil being presented so that the priest will have it to light the menorah every night or every evening, and keep the menorah lit from every evening to every morning. Then it talks about the showbread, because there's a table of showbread also in the tent of meeting, as it says here, or in the temple later on, where there's 12 loaves of bread that is replaced every Sabbath day. And then it goes on to talk about this individual that starts to blaspheme the name of God.
And the son of Leviticus 24, verse 10. And the son of an Israelitish woman, whose father was an Egyptian, went out among the children of Israel. And the son of the Israelitish woman and the man of Israel strove together in the camp. And the son of the Israelitish woman blasphemed the name and cursed. And they brought him unto Moshe, and his mother's name was Shalom, the daughter of D.C.B of the tribe of Dan. And they put him in ward, that it might be declared unto them at the mouth of Jehovah.
So there are some things to unpack here. There was a fight here for some reason, but we're not supposed to be fighting. But there was a fight that took place, number one. And in the process of that fight, one of these individuals blasphemed the name of God and cursed. Now, this fight, this cursing, was not done in the sight of Moses and Aaron. It was not done in the sight of all the millions of people that were there, but it was done in some public form of fashion. So what did the people do that heard of it?
They told,
and they brought it to the people that can do something about it.
Spread.
To do what?
Probably spread.
And it probably spread. But the people that witnessed it had to say something about it. This is how we unpack things. Things are done. Don't expect people to take care of things if people don't specifically talk about it. If things are done in public, it doesn't mean that everybody and all the millions of people saw it at the same time. It had to be brought to the people that can do something about it. Continue.
And Jehovah spoke unto Moshe, saying, Bring forth him that hath cursed without the camp, and let all that heard him lay their hands upon his head, and let all the congregation stone him. And thou shalt speak unto the children of Israel, saying, Whosoever curseth his God shall bear his sin. And he that blasphemeth the name of Jehovah, he shall surely be put to death. All the congregation shall certainly stone him, as well the stranger as the homeborn, and when he blasphemeth the name, shall he be put to death.
Because God's name is always going to be sanctified, and anybody that profanes the name of God is supposed to be put to death. So it said, bring forth him that cursed without the camp, because you're not going to kill him in the camp. You're going to kill him outside the camp, because when you kill him, what happens to him?
Unclean.
He becomes unclean, and everybody around becomes unclean. Right. And whose responsibility it is to put him to death first? The ones that heard it, their responsibility is to put their hands upon him. And one of the reasons is because, and this is not this question of speculation, but why are the witnesses the one to put their hands on the individual first?
Because they're the ones that made the accusation.
They're the ones that made the accusation. And
if there's any wrong.
And if it's a wrong accusation, it's upon their head. So therefore, once again, when you hear of, or when you see something or you hear something directly, it's your responsibility to speak about it and make sure something is done about it. For many years, things go on because people don't actually speak towards the matter.
Right.
People speak on podiums for years. Today, people speak on social media posts.
Uh-oh.
If you're going to speak about a matter, mention the names so things be taken care of. It's like what Samal Zakar mentioned last week. It's a general statement to not make is Israelites be wilding. Make a statement to say this individual has done X, Y, and Z. It's not one thing to make a general statement, say leadership and judges are not doing anything. Say leadership and judges are not doing anything about this individual. Start addressing individuals. Like if you write an email and you don't put an address in the to field, what happens to the email?
Don't get sent.
It don't get sent. Or back in the days that people that actually posted letters. If you posted a letter without putting an address on it, what happens? It gets sent back. Or if you don't put your address on it, it just goes in the... But they can't legally throw it in the garbage. It just stays somewhere. If you don't address people by name, then the matter's not going to get addressed. That's just simply what happened. So the people that heard the person curse, they heard and they brought him up to the people that can handle it. Continue.
And he that smiteth any man mortally shall surely be put to death.
So it's whatever you do to somebody, it's going to happen to you. Continue.
And he that smiteth a beast mortally shall make it good, life for life.
So if you slaughter somebody else's beast, you have to make sure that you replace that beast. If you take somebody's life, your life will be taken. And also some other things. Continue.
And if a man maim his neighbor, as he have done so shall it be done to him. Breach for breach, eye for eye, tooth for tooth. As he have maimed the man, so shall it be rendered unto him.
So whatever you do to somebody, and once we start doing judgments like this, you'll have less problems.
Yep.
If people, if people smack people and get away with it, more people are going to smack people and get away with it. The day that somebody smacks somebody and their face is red, and you smack them and their face is red, there'll be less smacking going on. The day that somebody, fights somebody and breaks their hand, and then you break their hand, the less fights are going to take place. And that's what was happening back then in terms of judgment. Today, and just to ask this question, because with the time we have left, we're in an age of orthopedic surgery. Mm-hmm. If somebody breaks somebody's hand, would you break their hand or make them responsible to have that individual's hand repaired, being that we have surgery today?
That might be more.
Huh?
That might be more costly.
Letter of the law says that
break his hand.
Break his hand.
Break his hand.
Yeah. Tooth for tooth. This is a general question. Just so far, a lot of these questions we took time out. We skipped some. We took a lot of time out just to think. Because these are how Torah discussions are actually held.
I think the significance of it is for you to feel what you cost on someone else. So to get someone, you can have long money,
Right.
So this is my money for breaking people's jaws. Breaking people's hands. So you break people's jaws, you're like, I'm gonna get it wired up.
Yeah.
I'm gonna give you your money for you to
Get dentures and all that stuff.
Get dentures and to your dates off of work. I got the money.
Right.
But I think the significance is for you
To feel.
what the other person felt. Wired up.
And continue.
And he that killeth a beast shall make it good, and he that killeth a man shall be put to death. You shall have one man of law as well as for the stranger as for the homeborn. For I am Yahweh your God. And Moshe spoke to the children of Israel, and they brought forth him that had cursed out of the camp, and stoned him with stones, and the children of Israel did as Yahweh commanded Moshe. Hallelujah.
Hallelujah. So not this last, I don't know if there's any question, but so this question, so these two individuals were fighting.
Right?
Say the Israelite man is the one that started the fight with the Egyptian man, because he just had an Israelite mother, but he was an Egyptian. The Israelite man attacked the Egyptian man, and in the process of him attacking him, broke his hand. But as a result of him having his hand broke, he cursed the name of God, which we know caused him to be put to death because he cursed God. What happens to the Israelite man that actually broke the individual's hand first before he cursed? Do you still break his hand even though the other person cursed and got himself put to death?
Yeah.
I'm going to say no.
You would say no? And you say yes, he threw the first punch. And you say no?
Our Torah is for us.
You what?
Our Torah is for us.
Okay. Let me ask the question differently. Two Israelite people are...
That's how you're going to have to say it like that.
One wrong for the homeborn in front of the stranger.
That passage is said for the
homeborn as well as the stranger. But just for his sake,
okay.
Two Israelites are fighting. One Israelite breaks the other Israelite's hand. And the Israelite that got his hand broken cursed the name of God. And of course, he get put to death for cursing the name of God. What happens to the Israelite that broke the other Israelite's hand?
You got to get his hand broken.
Now he got to break his. So we know who not to call for judgment, because it said one law for the home. So regardless of the other person being put to death, the individual that caused the harm still has to get his judgment. The moral of the story is, don't let somebody else's sin cause you to sin and cause you to be put to death. So thanking the Most High God for all that he has done for us. Oh, sorry. Any questions with the, we have 5 minutes. Related to the portion. Because once again, we just wanted to go through this about to make up a word, with brevity in order to cover some of the subject. But once again, we're focusing strictly on the portion for today. And while there are other questions coming up, we'll ask this question. So, go ahead.
Kaya brooding, do you have a special ritual for when the Shabbat day ends? There's no special ritual for when the Sabbath day ends. I mean, people may come up with their own, this congregation will have prayers at the end of the service, but if you're by yourself, there would be no special or no ritual involved with ending the Sabbath day. Also, while more questions are being pulled up, so we live in an age of orthopedic surgery. We live in an age of insurance. Someone drives down the block, a skinny block, knocks off two side mirrors. One car had full insurance, full coverage, no deductible. The other car doesn't. What would you do what would be the judgment for the individual that broke those two windows, those two mirrors? His car don't have any insurance?
We'll say he has insurance also, or he or she has insurance.
Well, his insurance pays for it.
But then that goes against what you just said, because he has insurance, he's not feeling the brunt of paying for that damage because he has insurance.
He's paying for the insurance. He pays for the insurance.
No, but we're talking about individuals, a person,
right?
And we're talking about an object.
Property.
That does not, a property that does not have
feelings and stuff like that.
Okay.
That's two different things. And the Torah also says in matters that are difficult between brother and brother, that you take certain cases to the judges.
Right.
Because they're going to be, God understood that as time went on, that there were going to be
Cases.
more cases
Right.
and advancement in society with things that were not back there. So
Right.
naturally, that's why insurance was created, and you have to drive with insurance. So that when you do damage to someone's car, property, or even an accident of hitting a person,
Right.
that your insurance covers all of that, because that is an accident.
Right. So, like I said, these are open-ended questions, but now,
Yes, you have to go to the city.
now,
because if
no,
you kill
oh, that was,
someone,
that'd be another question. But, right, but the thing is, does insurance cause people to be
reckless.
more reckless and feel less responsible? See, insurance is a requirement of the state, cities, and stuff like that. But, you know, once again, we just ask these questions to ask them. But does a person with insurance feel less responsible because they're already paying monthly for insurance? They take it for granted. I smash somebody's car, my insurance will pay for it. They're not really feeling what the other person's going through, the loss of use of the vehicle.
You are feeling it, because your insurance goes up.
But not as much as it takes to fix. Remember, your insurance is paying the bill for the fixing of that car,
Right, and then
not you.
sometimes you got a deductible.
Right. That's why I said no deductible.
No deductible, but
Your insurance gets the bill for that, and the insurance bill, the bill that the insurance gets for fixing that car still may not equate to the amount of insurance you've been paying. So you really never feel that.
your insurance goes up,
Right.
and eventually you're going to pay back for the damage.
Eventually. Right. But what if you decide to stop driving and say, I don't want to drive anymore?
Stop driving, you don't want to drive. Then you don't want to drive anymore, but the damage was paid.
By the insurance, not you.
It was still paid by you. Because if you've been paying insurance for
That's what I
years and you
said.
never got
Huh?
it for
Paying
that,
insurance, I
you've
said
been
that.
paying insurance for years. Eventually, you
If
pay for that.
not to get into, if your insurance premium,
It's difficult.
I know, if your insurance premium is $2,000 a year, so your insurance premium had to be $2,000 a year, and you damage somebody's car worth $10,000 worth of damages.
You've been paying insurance for 10 years.
That's why I was trying to be specific. You just started driving. You only paid 1
You
year.
didn't say that initially.
But that's why, as you mentioned, when these cases come up, but the responsibility of judges is to make sure that the other person is whole, number one, and the other person that is paying still feels it to an extent. Because that's how you meet our judgment, so that everybody is balanced in the end. But once again, a lot of these questions that were asked are just open for discussion. So we thank Jehovah God for, once again, all that he does for us. Thank him for our lives, thank you for strength, for good health. And once again, the main subject or main topic as we got to the end of this portion is, in order for things to be handled, you have to actually speak about it. And the less you speak about it, or just speak more about what's going wrong without actually speaking to the matter of specific people or things, the less things are going to be handled.
But isn't it the law about if you dig a ditch, right, that's also causing damage to
Right.
someone's property. And a mule or an ox or something falls in there.
Right.
And if your responsibility for that dish, right, that you got to make it whole.
Right.
And it also speaks about if someone's mule or
Ox, gore somebody
ox
else. Right.
is with, no, if
Oh.
you rent it out,
Right.
it came for its hire. But if the owner's with it, then you don't have to make
Pay
it good,
good.
because the owner was with it.
Right.
So, it shows liability and
On very,
different things.
and as time goes on, we ask these questions because these are the situations that may come up. Once again, you have surgery today, you got insurance, your insurance, or that individual's insurance may pay for that person's broken hand. How do you deal with that? But these are discussions we can have during the break. But you break somebody's hand, they have good insurance from their job, and they go to the hospital or go to orthopedic surgeon, and their insurance covers it. How is the person that broke that person's hand responsible? What's the insurance pays for it anyway? So once again, these are the questions that come up when we discuss Torah, and the overall thing is about judgment and making sure people are whole, making sure people are complete, and making sure victims are no longer victimized or put to shame for the things that they do. But we have to speak out more. So once again, thanking you, Jehovah God, for our lives. We thank you for strength and good health and the opportunity to call upon his name on this holy Shabbat day and praying that he continue